Hello, I'm George Harrison, the backyard birdwatcher. One of my greatest joys is watching the wild birds that live around my home. That's why I've designed both my house and its landscaping to maximize up-close and personal viewing of birds. I'd like to share with you how you can do the same around your home.
This program is made possible by annual financial support from viewers like you and by KT Products, providing wild bird food nationwide. For 125 years, KT has made the health and well-being of birds its prime commitment. KT, caring for birds today and tomorrow.
Looking out my living room window on this typical summer day, I see the lovely patio garden teeming with bird life. In one corner, a female ruby-throated hummingbird darts into the honeysuckle. She draws a long sip of nectar from the orange blossom. Nearby, her mate guards the territory. The sun illuminates the sequin-like feathers on his ruby throat. Above the center of the patio, bright yellow goldfinches eat hulled sunflower seeds. Another awaits in the spruce tree, not very patiently, for an opening at the feeder. A male rose-breasted grosbeak leans into the pool of water for a drink. When he straightens up, I see that large V-shaped red badge on his pure white breast. In the catalpa tree beyond the patio, a male cardinal sings his familiar song, proclaiming his territory and courting his mate. Below, a female works diligently building her nest of sticks and rootlets. Suddenly, a flash of yellow catches my eye as a female Baltimore oriole lands on the sugar water feeder. She flies to the pool for a drink and a bath, and then finds a tree in which to preen. From the bough of a blue spruce, a dapper male chipping sparrow trills his song. Nearby, in the lower branches of a cedar tree, his mate sits on a nest full of light blue eggs. If you would like to have birds like these outside your windows every day of the year, settle back and let me share with you how to develop a wild bird habitat in your backyard, no matter how small it is. It's easy to do, affordable, adds value to your property, and adds enormously to your quality of life. The birds in your backyard will be your daily connection with nature, dazzling you with all their beauty and wonderment. So even if you are starting from a grassy lawn, as I did, you can certainly develop a backyard wildlife habitat for birds. When I began planning the habitat on my half-acre, it looked very much like this. The only vegetation on the property were a few large trees and very few birds. Now, let's take a peek at my backyard as it looks today. Look what has happened. My yard is now a mini woodland full of lovely trees and shrubs and low-growing plants and flowers. It is now an attractive natural habitat, a sanctuary full of lovely wild birds. To have this in your own backyard, all you need to do is furnish the three basic needs of all life on Earth: cover, food, and water. Cover for birds is places to hide from predators, shelter from the weather, and safe places to nest. Food for birds consists of insects, fruit, nectar, nuts, and seeds. And water for birds is for drinking and bathing. Your first step is to draw a simple diagram of your property. Include the house, garage, driveway, lawn, and the limited cover that you already have. The diagram will show you where you have room for cover, food, and water for birds. When planning the cover, visualize your yard as a series of life zones. Like a stadium, the life zones are tiered, from the lowest growing plants and flowers to the canopies of the tallest trees. The goal is to provide cover in as many tiers as possible, because the more life zones available in the habitat, the more birds it will attract. For example, chipping sparrows feed on the ground, nest in shrubs, and sing from small trees. Robins also feed on the ground, but they nest in large shrubs and sing from tall trees. This movement by birds throughout the habitat illustrates how important a variety of cover is to a successful backyard habitat. Now let's take a walk around my house. I'll show you what makes a habitat a delightful microcosm for watching birds. This is an excellent wildlife habitat. We've allowed this corner of the yard to grow wild. Lots of biodiversity here, all the way to the top of these tall trees where the Baltimore Orioles nest, the middle shrubbery where we have chickadees and cardinals and catbirds, and then the song sparrows are into the low area here. But over here, we have landscaping. We've planted these plants specifically for birds. They produce good cover and food for the birds, and at the same time, they're aesthetically lovely. They add a lot to our surroundings. Not only is low-growing cover aesthetically pleasing, but it is essential to birds that live in the life zone closest to the ground, including mourning doves, white-throated sparrows, towhees, and juncos. These plants are the first tier in the habitat and fit nicely along walkways, foundations, and rocky walls. When selecting low-growing shrubs and ground cover, choose plants that grow to different heights and density. This variety of plants attracts a greater number of ground-dwelling birds into the habitat. Also, for maximum visibility of the birds, I planted this low-growing cover closest to the windows. Of course, the low-growing plants you select, indeed any of the plants chosen for your habitat, should be species that are well adapted to your region of the country and right for the birds. Your local nursery, landscaper, or agricultural extension agent can help you with these choices. Consider incorporating vines into the nooks and crannies of your garden. They fit nicely against walls and into the tight spaces of your habitat. Planting varieties that blossom, like this everbloom honeysuckle, attract hummingbirds drawn to the bright flowers. And the vine's thick green foliage provides good cover for a variety of birds. Watching an iridescent hummer probe deeply with its needle-like bill into such a blossom is a great reward for developing your backyard habitat. Fortunately, no matter where you live in North America, these living jewels are easy to attract during the summer. All you need to do is plant brightly colored flowers and the hummingbirds will appear. Their diet of nectar and insects compels them to inspect every available bloom. They are particularly attracted to those that are orange-colored like the honeysuckle and trumpet vine, and bright red like this canna, and magenta like this fuchsia. When you plant a garden for hummingbirds, remember to select both annuals and perennials for a continuous display of blooms from spring to fall. Once they find the flowers in your habitat, they will return to the blossoms time and time again, all day long throughout the summer. Their buzzing wings announce their arrival and departure. Flowers of all kinds can enhance your backyard habitat. Birds find the colorful vegetation good cover should they be threatened, and the blossoms produce food for more than just hummingbirds. For example, this female Baltimore oriole finds nectar in the blossoms of these fuchsia. Now let's move on to the next higher tier in your habitat. It includes small trees and large shrubs, such as high bush cranberry and red osier dogwood, for cardinals, blue jays, and catbirds. These shrubs are places to hide and nest, and they also bear fruit for eating throughout the year. The small trees you plant are also an integral part of this tier of the habitat. They include apple, birch, and mountain ash. Chickadees will find such small tree thickets a perfect niche for raising a family. And wrens will take up residence in the apple tree you plant. Robins will nest in small trees and high shrubbery, but then robins will nest almost anywhere, from rain gutters on houses to the highest tree canopies. They also need some lawn from which to get earthworms, so leaving a little grassy lawn in your habitat helps robins. They also scratch for worms and grubs on the floor of your dense cover, especially during dry weather when earthworms live deeper in the lawn. The tallest life zone in your habitat is the canopy of the largest shade trees. Though it'll take some time for these trees to grow tall, it'll be worth the wait because many birds use the canopy for nesting, capturing insects, and singing. The cardinal in the habitat will fly to the highest branch in the tallest tree, singing his lovely courtship song. And the male robin uses the same canopy from which to sing his caroling song. This is the most beautiful music to awaken to on a morning in spring. You'll notice that I've planted the life zones in tiers, like a stadium, so when looking out the window, I can see the entire habitat from the ground up. But the critical thing to remember is that you want to cover all the life zones. You want low-growing plants and flowers, you want shrubs, medium and large, small trees and large trees. You want to cover all those areas, and you also want to have materials that provide food and cover throughout the 4 seasons. As soon as your backyard habitat is established, you will see dramatic results. Even by growing minimal cover, birds will move into the life zones. Come the spring, they'll begin to sing and court, build nests, and raise families because the cover in your habitat will give the birds places to nest. Robins may build their nests of mud and grass in the forks of small trees and large shrubs, like this lilac, where the nest forms a perfect cradle for eggs. Some robins favor apple trees for nesting, others use evergreen trees. I often wonder how all the nestlings get enough to eat, because the one reaching the highest seems to get the worm. Luckily for me, this pair nested in the shrubbery outside my window, making it easy to see the youngsters. Soon they're ready to leave the nest and take wing, or more likely crash land on their first flight. Large shrubs are also great habitat for catbirds. They love to skulk around in the dense cover where they find food and nesting sites. The catbirds in my habitat constructed their nest deep in the shrubbery and raised 4 healthy youngsters. Every time I peeked into the nest, the parents scolded me with their cat-like meow. But at other times, the male serenaded me with his multitude of melodies that only a catbird can produce. Another bird that seeks small trees and dense shrubbery for nesting is the mourning dove. The bough of a cedar tree is the perfect place to build its fragile nest of twigs. Two pure white eggs are incubated for 13 days before hatching. While most baby birds are cute, mourning dove babies are kind of homely at first, but as they grow and sprout feathers, they gradually take on the beauty of their parents. Nest life is short for baby mourning doves, and 2 weeks after hatching, these youngsters are out of the nest and history to their mother. She's already building another nest for the next brood. Another benefit of tall trees in your backyard habitat is that they may attract a female hummingbird looking for a suitable place to build her tiny cup-like nest. She alone raises the 2 youngsters that hatch from navy bean-size eggs. It may surprise you that a hanging pot of flowers is a favorite nesting site of house finches. These lovely western birds, now also common garden birds in the east, often build nests and raise young in the center of a pot of geraniums or impatiens like this one. Another important aspect of any successful backyard wildlife habitat are tree cavities, holes in trees where birds can nest. If you don't have the cavities, you can also put up bird houses like this wren house. There are many kinds of houses, sizes, and so forth. You have to do a little research to find out what kinds of birds you want to attract. But one of the really great joys of having birds nesting in houses like this is you can hear them inside. The babies are calling right now. It's a wonderful sound. 30-some kinds of birds nest in tree cavities. If your backyard habitat has an abundance of dead trees, consider leaving them, as cavity nesting birds will use them. But most people don't save dead trees and instead offer birdhouses. Birdhouses will draw birds into the habitat, but the houses have to be placed in the niche where the birds normally nest in a cavity. For example, chickadees will readily use a birdhouse, but it has to be located in dense cover, such as a thicket of small trees. Wren houses should be placed in more open cover. In my habitat, the wrens use a house and a small apple tree. The very day the male wren arrives back to my habitat from his winter vacation in the tropics, he fills every birdhouse with sticks. His dummy nests keep other wrens from building in the houses. They also give his mate some options for a nesting site. When the female arrives a week or so later, she's escorted on a tour of the housing market of dummy nests. She likes this one and sets about renovating the nest to her liking. It isn't long before there are many little mouths to feed. Definitely a full-time job. Every time I walk past the nesting house, the male wren scolds me. Once the rascal attacked me, pecking me on the head. Birdwatching can be dangerous. Everyone would like to have bluebirds nesting in their backyards, but bluebirds require habitat that is totally different from the typical backyard. I am fortunate to live across the road from a farm field, which is ideal habitat for bluebirds. Here they can catch insects and find fruit such as blackberries and raspberries to feed to themselves and their young. I attracted them by mounting several bluebird houses on fence posts at the end of my driveway. Much to my delight, a pair of bluebirds soon appeared. They apparently liked the location and moved in late May. I noticed that bluebirds had the palest blue eggs of all thrushes, much paler than those of robins. But then bluebirds are the only thrushes that nest in cavities, making protective coloration of eggs less important. In recent years, many people across the country have put up bluebird nesting houses, forming what are called bluebird trails. These efforts have helped bluebirds recover from dangerously low population levels. Now bluebirds are again common in rural areas. If you put up bluebird houses in your habitat, don't be surprised if tree swallows move in, because bluebird houses are just the right size for tree swallows. Yet tree swallows need to be near water where they can gather aquatic insects, a staple food for them and their young. If your habitat is located on a small lake or stream, as mine is, you can expect to attract tree swallows in your bluebird houses. Do you recognize these beautiful birds? They are purple martins. Contrary to the needs of most backyard birds, purple martins require less cover and a great deal more open habitat in which to catch insects. The ideal location for a purple martin apartment house is on a pole in a grassy field or sizable lawn. Here the birds can get a long sweeping approach to and from the house. If this sounds like your backyard habitat, you may have an opportunity to attract these lovely birds to an apartment house or individual houses in a cluster. Though starting a new martin colony can be hit or miss, if the conditions are right, it's worth a try. The first males, returning to the apartment house from the tropics in springtime, are called the advance guard. The colony arrives a few days or a week later, and then the nesting cycle begins in earnest. Each pair occupies one unit of the apartment house, where they build a nest, lay eggs, and raise their young at about the same time as the other pairs. The colony really gets active when the eggs hatch, and there are dozens, if not scores, of little mouths to feed. Among woodpeckers, flickers are the most apt to nest in a birdhouse. But it must be middle size, somewhere between a bluebird and a wood duck house, and mounted on a tree trunk 8 to 20 feet above the ground. It's also possible to have wood ducks nesting in your backyard habitat if there's water nearby. To get a wood duck's attention, you need to put up at least one duck house on a post or on the trunk of a tree near the water. Wood ducks are marvelous birds to watch in spring as they perch in trees in very unduck-like fashion. They're looking for natural cavities in which to lay eggs, but will accept a large birdhouse designed for them. Once the hen decides, the egg-laying process begins. She deposits one egg per day until the clutch is completed, perhaps as many as 15 eggs. If you put up wood duck houses, be aware that they may attract more than wood ducks. Both screech owls and American kestrels will use wood duck houses to roost and nest. You may not be thrilled to have either predator move into your bird habitat because they subsist on a diet of songbirds and small mammals. But if you love birds like I do, you may be delighted to have both take up residence in your habitat. These kestrels nested in a house built by a neighbor who followed the specifications I gave in one of my books. "It sure worked," he told me. "As soon as I put up the house on a tall pole, the kestrels moved in." Seeing baby falcons like these up close is another prize of a backyard habitat. While the kestrels are out and about hunting during the day, the owls do their hunting at night. Yet during early morning and late afternoon, a screech owl sits in the entrance to the duck house, appearing to be half asleep. But she sees everything, probably eyeing up dinner. It's not surprising that every spring when cleaning out the duck house, I find feathers from cardinals, downy woodpeckers, and robins. In fact, the first robin of spring one year was not on the wing, but inside the duck house, the remains of a screech owl's dinner. Let's talk about food for birds and how you can make it available in your backyard habitat. The same lush cover that attracts birds to habitats is also home to a vast army of insects in all stages of life, from eggs to larvae to adults. These insects are the principal food for virtually all neotropical birds, those spending their winters in the tropics and their summers in our backyard habitats. The cover produces the insects, which draws birds such as this red-eyed vireo and blue-gray gnatcatcher. These birds do not eat from feeders, but they do eat from the abundance of insects in the vegetation. This enormous food supply is especially important to parent birds that must gather insects and feed them to nestlings. When there are baby birds to feed, the backyard habitat is teeming with activity. Parent birds are scouring the cover for insects to satisfy the insatiable appetites of hatchlings. To keep the broods of wrens fed, the parents carry insects to the house every few minutes. Just imagine the number of insects these hungry babies consume in just one day. Yet there seems to be such an abundance of insects in the habitat that the wrens have little trouble finding the next meal in the immediate vicinity of the nesting house. Nearby at the bluebird house, it's much the same. Bluebird parents catch insects for their young in the grassy fields across the road by snagging prey on the wing. Both parents feed the nestlings small insects at first, but as the youngsters grow, so do the size of the insects. In a few days, the baby bluebirds begin to grow dark downy feathers, and then quills appear on their wings. When I peek into their house to check the progress of these little guys, it's the highlight of my day. Tree swallows catch food for their young by swooping down over the lake and, like bats, snag aquatic insects in flight. Then back to the nesting house where they cram the fresh-caught food into their young. When young chickadees fledge, the parents are busier than ever catching insects for their youngsters, who are now scattered all over the habitat. No wonder adult chickadees look so worn out at the end of the nesting season. Perhaps the most consistent insect diet is fed to young purple martins. Their parents constantly course back and forth over farm fields and broad grassy lawns, swooping here and there for flying insects. These are perfect snacks for wee martins back at the apartment house. Insects are not the only natural food grown in a successful backyard habitat. The best cover plants are those that also bear fruit, nuts, seeds, and nectar. For example, high bush cranberry, serviceberry, mountain ash, and holly are good cover plants that also yield berries relished by mockingbirds and cardinals. Robins, caught in a late spring snowstorm, may depend on these kinds of long-lasting fruits for their survival. It's also a good idea to encourage the growth of food-bearing plants in a part of the habitat that is allowed to grow wild. In the wild part of my habitat, a goldfinch finds thistle seed to eat, but they have to wait until midsummer for thistle to mature, so that they can use the fibers to build their nests and the seeds to feed their young. The seeds of many garden flowers are nourishing additions to wild bird diets. Among the best are members of the sunflower family. Sunflower seeds are eaten by at least 42 bird species. Some can't even wait until the seeds mature, so when selecting flowers for your garden, keep the birds in mind. We've created this natural habitat with lots of cover and natural food. We've also added bird feeders. The feeders bring the birds out of the cover, close to the house, close to the windows, where we can enjoy them. No matter how many food-producing plants are growing in your habitat, there is always a great advantage to giving birds supplemental food in feeders. Feeders are the jewels in the crown of the habitat. They pull the birds out of the cover and up close for quality viewing. Feeders placed in cover but close to windows give you the pleasure of watching birds all year long. You should offer a variety of feeders containing several different kinds of foods. Please don't make the mistake of putting the feeders in the middle of an open space. Place them in cover, but close enough to windows to give a marvelous view of as many kinds of birds as possible. And feed the birds year-round, as I do, so that you can enjoy them close up throughout the 4 seasons. In summer, you can watch hummingbirds and orioles drink sugar water from feeders. Goldfinches eat hulled sunflower seeds from hanging feeders. Cardinals and rose-breasted grosbeaks are also drawn out of the cover to feeders, as well as blue jays. And woodpeckers load up on beef soot at feeders on tree trunks, and at other feeders where they eat sunflower seeds. In winter, you'll enjoy seeing the northern invaders, such as this flock of evening grosbeaks. They'll entertain you as long as you have enough sunflower seeds for them. Perhaps the most fascinating are hummingbirds. Would you believe that they remember where the feeders were hanging the previous summer? When the first bird returns from the tropics in springtime, it hovers in the exact spot where the feeder hung last summer. It looks through my window as if announcing, "Hey, I'm here! Where's the feeder? I'm hungry after that long flight." Each feeder contains a mixture of 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. Red dye really isn't necessary to catch the hummer's attention, particularly if the feeder has red on it. By hanging the feeder near the flowers they like, the birds find the sweet water quickly. After the hummers get used to sipping from the feeder, you can move it up close to the windows for maximum viewing. From here, watch the hummers' extraordinary maneuverability as they fly forward and backward, up and down, left and right, and hover motionless at the feeder. From full speed, they can stop on a dime. Notice that the females and juveniles have emerald green backs and are white below. If you live in the east, you'll see only the ruby-throated. In the west, any of 15 different hummingbirds may visit your feeders and flowers. During late summer, young and old hummingbirds alike feed heavily in preparation for their long migration flight to the tropics, which may include a 500-mile non-stop flight across the Gulf of Mexico.
An important part of an integrated natural habitat is water, preferably moving water, water that makes noise, splashing noise. We have this pond here, and then we have another one in the back that cascades. The moving water acts as a magnet to birds.
The sight and sound of moving water give me a feeling of tranquility and contentment. The same may be true of birds, as water draws many birds to my habitat that might not otherwise spend any time here at all. Many that come to water neither eat from feeders nor nest in birdhouses. They come just for the water. Both of my bird baths are located near windows because I don't want to miss anything. There's always something interesting going on at the water. Both were custom made with mortar and stones. The bath at the edge of the patio was poured into 3 sheet metal forms and then stacked into 3 pools. A small pump lifts water to the top pool, then it spills into the middle pool and downward to the bottom. This bath has a small pool at the top which spills into rivulets that cascade into the bottom. But your bird bath doesn't have to be as elaborate as mine to satisfy birds. They'll drink and bathe in a simple bird bath on a pedestal, or a decorative dish hanging in the garden. Even a garbage can lid placed upside down on the ground and filled with water will bring in the birds. Some birds that stop at the bath are bonus birds, migrants that are just passing through the habitat. But the most consistent bathers are the summer residents, those nesting and raising young in the natural cover of the habitat. Like this chickadee, she takes a few seconds from her busy day of feeding fledglings to take a bath. Her dip is not for pleasure, though it undoubtedly feels good. She bathes by necessity, for she has to care for her feathers. She depends on healthy feathers to fly. Robins appear at the water every few minutes. It seems they need to drink and bathe more than other birds. Almost daily in summer, a male yellow warbler comes to the bath and throws water all over the patio as he douses himself. Then he's off to a nearby shrub to dry and preen his bright yellow feathers. A blue jay appears at the bath frequently. His bright blue feathers turn black as they become wet. Goldfinches are regular visitors, and so is a female oriole. And the chipping sparrows, nesting in the cedar, they spend time at the bath every day. Birds require water. If you provide it in your habitat, the birds will use it. If you place it near your windows, the water will give you an exciting, unique dimension in backyard birdwatching. If you invest the effort to create your own backyard habitat today, you can look out your window and see something exciting happening there every day for a lifetime. The world outside your window will be a kaleidoscope of nature with all the drama, beauty, and fulfillment of life itself. For birds are among the most exciting creatures on earth. They will perform on your stage naturally every day throughout the 4 seasons.
I hope I've inspired you to make your backyard more attractive to birds. Remember, bird watching is not just a sometime thing. When you have all the right ingredients for a successful backyard habitat, the birds will come, minute by minute, hour by hour, throughout the 4 seasons. This is George Harrison, the Backyard Bird Watcher.
This is PBS.